remind him of what Charles Hamilton Houston once said regarding black lawyers. He said, either they are going to be social engineers for justice, or they will be social pariahs or piranhas on the black community. When you see black lawyers making excuses like Cheryl Woods and others talking about, we got to go down, you most likely they ain't going down, do nothing but get the freak on, get the party on, get the dance on, and get a hookup if I can keep it real. You're not going down there to do no networking for the most part, like the Congressional Black Caucus does when they had them CBC weekends, man. So all we're saying is that make them do right and be fair, and not look at their professional jobs and professional positions, because they would not have those positions if it wasn't for, again, those who paid the ultimate sacrifice to make this country what it was, but unfortunately now, in terms of what it has become. But again, we may find out some of these black lawyers, some of these black journalists, and the NAACP may have more George Zimmerman in them than they do Trayvon Martin. They may have more George Zimmerman in them. And those assailants that work with George Zimmerman to snuff out the life of Trayvon Martin may have more of them in them than they do in terms of the best of us as a people. But again, we would say if the NAACP doesn't boycott Florida, then perhaps we should. If you got a membership in the NAACP, perhaps you ought to burn that card. Just say, burn, baby, burn. Tell them no justice, not no peace, but no justice, no lease. And of course, if they wanted to get out of that contract, all they got to do is invite Reverend Jeremiah Wright. And you know the whites down in Florida will cancel that contract overnight. All they got to do, if I can keep it real, is invite the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And you know them Jews in Florida, if I can keep it real, because it is Israel down there in Boca Raton, Florida. If I can keep it real, those Jews would cancel that night, cancel that contract overnight. So don't let them try to muscle their way out of the conversation. Well, we can't get out of the contract, Brother Muhammad. We can't get out of the contract. But if they were serious about justice, they'd get out of the contract. They were serious about talking about stand your ground. They stand their ground. And rather be running around here talking about saying we shall not be moved. They being moved, they being grooved, and they being smoothed in terms of spending money down there in Florida. But let me quickly give you a couple of companies that I want to get into. Is that we'll hear this quick message from Dr. King talking about boycotts. One company in particular that our young people particularly drink, of course, is Gatorade. That's one company. Stop your young folk. They don't need to be drinking that mess anyway. Just tell them don't buy Gatorade. And we'll put out a flyer regarding Gatorade. And of course, and that's made by, I think it was bought out by Quaker Oats, but Quaker Oats has since been bought out by Pepsi. And you know, for some of us old folk, you don't need to be drinking no Pepsis anyway. The Pepsi has been known to kill more kidneys than kidney beans. You need to leave them Pepsis alone anyway. We 13% of the U.S. population, 87% of the people that's on kidney dialysis look like you and me. You go over to Africa, that old backwards continent, you want to talk about Africa, some of you say. They don't have a kidney dialysis machine over there. From Zimbabwe all the way up to Zanzibar. They don't have a kidney dialysis machine from Cape Town to Cairo, from South Africa to Egypt. But over here they do, because they're weapons of mass destruction against our community. So here's two companies we'll give you that you can start with, man. And Gatorade targets their products right at black youth. They got a new campaign out with Kevin Durant, called Jumpstart Your Game. Our motto is Dump Start the Game. Dump start the game is what we're saying, man. So that we force them and the federal government and perhaps take the case to the UN, to the World Court, and charge this government with genocide when we're looking at blacks being killed in the cities the way we're being killed. They don't want you to go after the manufacturers of the firearms because they got friends on Wall Street. They got friends in the Department of Justice. They got friends in the White House. They want to tell you we can go after the illegal tobacco producers, but we can't go after the illegal arms runners, the lords of war. So what's wrong with that picture? What's wrong with that picture? Because they're well protected, man. Because they're the white guys in them Brooks Brothers suits and them ugly Bostonian shoes. So we'll be coming back to give you more information over the next couple of days, I promise you, on the economic boycott. And I thank the young people that was out there demonstrating in the city of Baltimore yesterday. I thank the young folk and those who were harmonizing with the young people. I know my oldest daughter was one out there, but I thank the young people for taking that kind of stand. And I understand the city of Baltimore, the head of the Department of Recreation. Now, if you ever been down in front of City Hall, your man done had an extreme makeover, and City Hall has had an extreme makeover. They got water, they got fountains now flowing down there in front of City Hall. On a hot day like yesterday, you would have thought that the mayor would have gave the order to keep the fountains on so those that want to get a cool drink or just run under the sprinklers could run under the sprinklers. But I was told that the department head of the Department of Recreation gave orders to cut the water off, man. Treating you worse than the animals in the zoo. treating you worse than the animals in the zoo down there yesterday. Understand, he gave the orders to cut the water off. But this is the arrogance that you see coming from them, as we saw last week with them private parties that they having at public recreations and public pools. Having private parties. I'm talking about the whites now, not Charlie Douglas Harambe, because that's been consistent and persistent for the past 20-something years. But you would have those to say that it's none of your business what kind of private parties we having, but at the same time say cut off the public sprinklers in front of City Hall. If this not taking you back 50 years, I know they always say when it come the first week in October, last weekend in March, they always say turn the clock back 1 hour. But they trying to turn the clock back on you 50 years in this city. 50 years in this state, 50 years in this country right now. But again, I thank the young folk that are standing up, and we have to have those that's willing to stand up and man up and not can up. But let me go to this piece of Dr. King. Then I'm going to come back in the bottom of the hour and have my guest, of course, get into this conversation as we're talking about racial profiling, spatial profiling, and facial profiling. And sometimes not just individuals, but entire families, entire communities are being profiled. And we in this country that don't want to talk about race, but we got to force them to grow up. Because if Trayvon Martin was Gayvon Martin, you better know George Zimmerman would have been charged with some multiple counts of murder. If he was Gayvon Martin, if I can keep it real to the LGBT community and others, know that George Zimmerman would have been charged and your president would not have a problem saying a black gay youth. But for some reason they want to say youth, the president and the attorney general Eric Holder, but not a young black youth. So again, let me go to this clip of Dr. King talking about the issue of, again, boycotts, because this is what we're going to have to use. You want something you never had, you got to do some things you never done. The question is, what are you willing to sacrifice, and where are our convictions? Where are our convictions? As I see plenty convictions now, addictions, but where are our convictions, and where do our convictions lies? Do we want justice, or we want to go down to Disney World? Do you want justice, or you want some damn Minute Maid orange juice? Do you want some justice, or do you want natural Florida orange juice? Do you want justice, or you want to be able to go shopping when you look around the world, other people are in the malls and in the squares fighting, you want to go shopping at the squares? So again, all of this that we see existing can be stopped overnight with our unity, man, with real unity. And again, you're going to have to go around this misleadership or these gatekeepers like Al Sharpton, Ben Jealous, and Mark Moriarty. You're going to have to go around them, over them, under them, or through them if necessary. Because they're not going to call for boycotts because they benefit from these corporations. These corporations sponsors their conventions. These corporations sponsor their conferences, so they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. I don't care what they say. As the brothers say, watch what they do. Or they do, as the young folks say. Watch what they do. But clearly, they're not going to call for this kind of boycott. They'll be generic about a boycott, but not specific in particular about targeting a certain company. We're giving you specifics and particulars in terms of Gatorade, in terms of natural Florida orange juice, in terms of going straight at Minute Maid. So that's what we're telling you to do. We're giving you something specific to give the young folk to do, and you as well. But let me go to this clip of Dr. King, and then we're going to come back in. It's not that long. Then we're going to get into more of the state of the city with my guests that are joining me. But again, I just thought we'd talk about, again, economic sanctions and, again, the power of the boycott in terms of what we must use and those ingredients of the communication, the mobilization, the organization, the education, and, of course, if necessary and when necessary, litigation, legislation, and confrontations. And all of those ingredients had to be used during the height of the civil rights movement and must be used now. So here now, let me go to this clip of Dr. King, and then we'll come back in and get into more of the state of the city. Listen to this message, and we'll be back with more of the state of the city following this message of Dr. King talking about economic withdrawal, giving you something that we all can do.
White robes over yonder in all of its symbolism. But ultimately, people want some suits and dresses and shoes to wear down here. It's all right to talk about streets flowing with milk and honey, but God has commanded us to be concerned about the slums down here and his children who can't eat 3 square meals a day. It's all right to talk about the New Jerusalem, but one day God's preacher must talk about the new New York, the new Atlanta, the new Philadelphia, the new Los Angeles, the new Memphis, Tennessee. This is what we have to do. Now, the other thing we'll have to do is this. Always anchor our external direct action with the power of economic withdrawal. Now, we are poor people. Individually, we are poor when you compare us with white society in America. We are poor. Never stop, forget that collectively, that means all of us together, collectively we are richer than all the nations in the world with the exception of 9. Did you ever think about that? After you leave the United States, Soviet Russia, Great Britain, West Germany, France, and I can name others, the American Negro collectively is richer than most nations of the world. We have an annual income of more than $30 billion a year, which is more than all of the exports of the United States and more than the national budget of Canada. Did you know that? That's power right there if we know how to pool it. We don't have to argue with anybody. We don't have to curse and go around acting bad with our words. We don't need any bricks and bottles. We don't need any Molotov cocktails. We just need to go around to these stores and to these massive industries in our country and say, God sent us by here to say to you that you're not treating his children right. And we come by here to ask you to make the first item on your agenda fair treatment where God's children are concerned. Now, if you are not prepared to do that, we do have an agenda that we must follow. And our agenda calls for withdrawing economic support from you. So as a result of this, we're asking you tonight to go out and tell your neighbors not to buy Coca-Cola in Memphis. Go by and tell them not to buy seal-pressed milk. Tell them not to buy, what is the other bread? Wonder Bread. And what is the other bread, come to Jesse? Tell them not to buy Hart's bread. As Jesse Jackson has said, up to now, only the garbage men have been feeling pain. Now we must kind of redistribute the pain.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. That was, of course, the prophetic words, the revolutionary Dr. King giving instructions regarding the economic boycott and gave you 4 companies at that time to boycott. All we're saying is use the methods that we used yesterday and bring them up today. The NAACP could have taken a lead by canceling their convention. The National Association of Black Journalists could have followed a foot. And, of course, the National Black Bar Association could have followed foot as well in terms of a boycott. And then, of course, instructing our people, if they love you, they'd be willing to lead you. Al Sharpton could do the same, but know that show on MSNBC and that nationally syndicated radio show, because these Negroes today, in the words of Kwame Ture, in the 60s we sung and said, power grows out of the barrel of the gun. These Negroes today think that power grows out of the barrel of the camera. The more cameras you get, the more power you have, and that's an illusion of inclusion. But speaking of a conclusion, let me get ready to bring up my guest here and talk about, again, as we've been looking at this issue of racial profiling and spatial profiling and